And here we are, the end of the universe.
Well, now what?
It's a second Big Bang. My God, we just need to keep going forward in time to the point when we left. The Earth is born.
How we doing, everybody? Today, I saw a short that just reminded me of my own series so much. And this dude does such a good job at explaining the nature of cycles and how it like relates to the universe and stuff. A great jumping off point to just explain some quick stuff about my world, how it works, actually teach a little bit about like how you can apply it to your own writing too. So without further ado, let's just get right after it here.
History repeats, and this is no secret whatsoever. And if it repeats, there is a pattern. And that pattern is the story or the narrative that is repeating in history over and over. And right here it is. You can see that it's just binary code. This is the pattern of one single year. We've got spring, summer, fall, and winter. And we can see year after year that that pattern, spring, summer, fall, and winter, repeats over and over and over again. Hey, that's waveform. And so on the most basic elementary level, you can see that what I have said so far is absolutely, unarguably true. There's no debate here that history repeats a solid pattern of spring, summer, fall, and winter year after year after year in waveform.
Yeah, what we're seeing here is like a recurring pattern throughout nature and the universe and stuff. And you can break this down to minutes and seconds, seasons. He gets into that further. There's some interesting ideas here.
On the most fundamental level, this is the truth of our reality. You see, we all agree that history repeats the seasons, right? Even at the equator where they only get 2 seasons, we still recognize that that's binary code as well. So let's break this down further. Spring, summer, fall, and winter. That's a pattern. Birth, growth, entropy, death. That's the pattern of a human life. Yes, it exactly matches this pattern right here. It's the same one. So we have 1 year. We have an entire lifetime. Every single day of your life displays the pattern of spring, summer, fall, and winter. When you wake up, go to work, come home from work, and go to bed. Only to wake up and do it all again day after day after day. Every day, figuratively, symbolically, displays the same exact pattern of the year or the human life. There is one pattern that repeats in all things, not just history.
Why is this important? He even brought up symbolism here. Now, my world of Arche is the sandbox I've created to tell any story I want to tell. That was my goal from the beginning. So it's as old as it needs to be, the world is, to tell whatever story I need to tell, because I'm fascinated with the cycle of like renewal that happens like on the earth. We're seeing periods of global warming and cooling, apocalypses happening, multiple floods that every civilization talks about. Just the idea of like Pangea versus like what the continents look like now, even within the mainstream realm of things, it's pretty wild. The mysterious origins of the moon. There's all these crazy things within our own solar system and our own planet that I find fascinating, that I had to just tie them all into my world. Basically an Earth-like planet tilted on a 90-degree axis, which messes with everything. It's stuck in this perpetual ice age. It's got 3 moons that mess with it, this idea of an ice age, because this binary of a warm side of the planet and a cold side of the planet just ties in with a lot of this cyclical stuff that goes on here. Now, a lot of this ties into just throughout history. Our ancestors talked a lot about this. Like they basically had this as their religion. They would worship the cycle of seasons and life and death, basically all the elements he's talking about without the fancy words like binary code. So this is like a timeless story of like humanity, human life, everything, life and death. And I love ingraining it into a world that embodies that entire idea. Let's tie this into writing a little bit. So once you've like formed a pattern like this, you can use this in powerful, clever, devastating effect with your writing, kind of conditioning the reader into very subtly picking up on the inner heartbeat of your story by representing these things. There's things that I've even taken like from certain religions. The stigmata, I think, is the word from I think it's Catholicism. This like recurring motif that happens around like divine events where there's recurring patterns that emerge, like divine patterns. You could call this entire thing that he's breaking down here some sort of divine universal pattern that is like within everything. You can use these stigmatas or these patterns to get people used to something and then pull the rug out from under them. And I don't mean like subverting, I mean like in like the most effective fashion to like deliver that twist in your story. You can kind of already almost see like a resemblance to the hero's journey, right? Or like the story circle, there's patterns.
But we can all see that binary code is the pattern that repeats every day, every year, every human lifetime. You start at the bottom, you peak, and then you end at the bottom again.
Binary, so life and death, good and evil, light and dark, hot and cold, winter, summer, you get it.
So here is our familiar pattern that repeats. This is the narrative or the story that repeats in history every day, every year, every 80 years. But this is also the same pattern as an entire age on the earth. The flood ended the first age on the earth.
There's like 7 million years of human history that's not being taken into account. But what he's doing is he's just creating a rudimentary timeline for the sake of understanding. So you could look at this as like lore for a book, right? Different ages. Lord of the Rings has ages, right? Cyclical symbolism, a crazy hero from the first age, protagonist in a story that you're focusing on in the fourth age starts resembling qualities of. And furthermore, what I like to do is take more real world examples. Familiarity is an important part of my writing. I know I write fantasy, so I can't necessarily say realism. I like to add realism to the fantasy and sci-fi and all that. But I think the proper term is just to have like a layer of comfort and familiarity, which is why I dig into tropes a lot. I really like the idea of like the reptilian race, the orcs, the goblins, you know, the deep ones, all these different awesome aspects that makes fantasy. And if I can take that and put it within layers of familiarity and imbue real world things and tie in timeless ideas like what we're looking at here, not necessarily the hero's journey, but that's another great example. Once it becomes second nature, you're not even trying to do it, weaving all these elements in passively. And at the end of the day, you realize literally every single word you have written is connected and relevant. It's a way of like being able to world build in a different like dimension. And I love it.
The point is that the pattern is clearly displayed in these things for certain. The same story repeating on a much smaller scale. The third age is just the same story repeated again, but it's getting a little bigger as we go. It was all the way big, it got thrown all the way down, but now it's growing up once more, preparing the stage for the fourth age. They even had their own personal little Armageddon, just like they did and just like they did.
So you can literally imbue these timeless aspects, these patterns into the deeper, smaller, localized events that take place within everything. And it can keep getting grander too. You can get on a universal scale if you're like more universe and like multiverse kind of thing. You can get galactic with these parallels and the symbolism too.
That same story, just repeating through the ages. Oh, days, years, lifetimes, ages. Every age has the same pattern of spring, summer, fall, and winter. Birth, growth, entropy, death. Hey, that's the same as nations themselves.
The fourth turning, seemingly unrelated, completely related, right? Cycles of civilization. He hits at surface level, but it's enough to get the point across.
Well, just like the second age set the stage for the third age, the third age set the world stage for the fourth age. The world, after the flood, has grown all the way back up now. And I'm talking about mankind and civilization upon the face of it, to be certain. The world and its systems, not the earth. So it's kind of like this: spring, summer, fall, and now we are in winter. This is the whole history of the earth. This is the first age, the second age, the third age, and the fourth age.
The story of your life. I love this stuff. I'm going to let him keep talking though.
Because as history repeats this story day after day, year after year, millennia after millennia, it's repeating this narrative, perfecting it as it goes. correcting all the errors as it goes. It keeps running that story over again because it is perfecting it. And what I mean is, like, reality is a machine that is processing the data by running it over and over and over again until it is perfect.
A machine like an author's brain, but I'll continue.
It runs this story over and over again. The story of the world is being perfected by running it over and over again in the hands of a master who is perfecting it. And this is similar to building a house. The entropy or loss or atom in that equation.
Building a house, writing a story, living a life, fixing a car, the act of creation. It goes on. It's crazy. It's crazy, though.
Is all the parts and pieces of the wood and materials that get cut off and are too small to use for anything else, and so go into the dumpster.
Editing.
You see, all the parts and pieces don't come cut to size. You have to cut them to size according to the plans. And when it's done, you have a finished product, a new house, and a dumpster full of scraps. And this is just reality on every single level. You see, the builder perfects the materials according to his plan as he goes.
The writer edits his story according to the outline as they go.
Like a goldsmith who is God, refining gold, the world, in the fire. There's gonna be impurities get burned off. There's loss in every system, fellas. It's the law of distribution or whatever. We all know no pain, no gain, right? Gotta spend money to make money, right? That's nested toroids. If you were hoping I'd say that word. Yep. There it is.
He said
That's
the same.
History repeating that single pattern from hour to day to year to lifetime to age to the whole story of the earth from start to finish. It's just that one pattern played out over the large scale. Now, this pattern repeats in all things. It is the pattern of everything. Russian nesting dolls. This isn't just your hour, your day, your year, your lifetime.
Chapters, scenes, sentences, paragraphs.
Whatever. This is the universe. This pattern right here is the same exact picture as this right here. That's what a toroid does. It's toroidal wave function. It spins like atoms do. That's just the toroidal wave function of a hydrogen atom. There's the toroidal wave function of our solar system. This is a more literal depiction of our solar system than this is. The toroidal wave function is just binary code. The exact same thing as this right here. It is the reason things are born, grow, get old, and die. And according to the instructions of the one who created it.
Let me elaborate here. Using this idea to kind of like add that extra layer to your writing. Like, this is why I lean into traditional fantasy races, for example. And I just like to add my new flair on it because it's a layer of comfort. So you have this fantasy world that's Earth-like. There's that layer of comfort. An ice age, that's something we know about a little bit. I take a lot of examples from real world, like inspiration from historical figures and stuff, because now it adds an educational factor to it. So a lot of my stories, for example, A Gift of Ghosts from Mortal Descent, my current published book, it's the first story in it, that I learned about Queen Boudica and her rebellion against Rome, and it really inspired me. And that comes from my own like Celtic Welsh ancestry. Like, that's a great place to start. Just no matter who you are, start with the things that make you who you are, and you can dig into that, like whether that's actual things that have happened to you personally, the history stuff like your family, whatever these ideas are, you can delve into it. It's like sticking to what you know, right? If I'm gonna choose to like look at history, learn about stuff for my own entertainment, and then take the coolest aspects of that and implement it into my own stories, I'm kind of passing down these ideas that persevere throughout time. And it's a little bit more than fantasy, in my opinion. Even if I fail at doing it, I'm at least trying. You know, anybody knows like the story of like Alexander the Great and, you know, Hercules, these things that already exist. Even the bad guy from World War II that always makes a compelling narrative, like so many people draw similarities to him. And so what you get is essentially this sandbox that has all the trimmings of fantasy mixed with a tinge of educational value in there without it being like too direct or preachy, because I love my fantasy, man. I love my deep, gritty, complicated fantasy, but I do understand that not everybody can get into every detail of your freaking world building. That's why I think it's important to keep RK very Earth-like. Whatever I don't tell them, I want them to assume something that's probably close to what the reality is, you know, because there's going to be a lot of things I'm not telling people in my writing. That's part of my style, leaning heavily on like this woo-woo biblical, like the definition of epic, distanced perspective with like the word choices I use and stuff. I'm trying to be a little bit like flowery. You choose specific words just in the very description of the word itself, because I've associated it just in this passive sentence, can symbolize a million other things, right? A classic example I love to point to, Odin. As soon as you have a character that has like one eye and like a pet bird, it doesn't even matter what kind of bird, right? They just have a pet bird and one eye. Just the very fact that there's association between pirates and Odin, I can start drawing conclusions myself. And they don't necessarily all have to be right, but it lets the reader immerse themselves in it using familiar things. So in the future, aside from my full-length novel, which fully focuses on one character, tried my best to imbue it, refined it with mortal descent, what you're going to see here is a detailed, boots on the ground, so to speak, literally in the character's head, depiction of RK, and everything going forward will be the short stories, you know, the RK Chronicles and stuff. And that's so I can just jump around to any age, any technology, any race of people, any character, any cool event, any historical moment that I want, and really focus in on it and create my own historical thing around it, my own character. Like, I got this cool character idea, I can get it out. One thing I've realized through my career doing music and all this stuff is when you're creative and you have an idea, it's not that the idea is fleeting, and it's not necessarily that it's your only window to implement that idea. But if you don't start doing it, at least taking baby steps towards it, somebody else is just going to do a slightly different version and be more successful at it, whether it's because they have more resources or they're just more popular. There's a lot of missed things there, like feeling cool that you had a good idea that at the same time somebody else had a really successful idea. There's a chance that you could have been the successful one instead of that person. That's always a chance. Even riding the success of that other IP up. Take the opportunity. I've seen it with lyrics. I've seen it with like video ideas, song ideas, story ideas, all kinds of, just like take baby steps towards it, and why not? Like my short stories, it comes in reading format, so you still get the ability to read. It's short enough I can turn it into a comic. Graphic novel is perfect length for a complete story. Each story is complete. It can be animated in the future. I can just pump these ideas out from my story seed bank, I call it, and just get them out on paper. You got that cool character, pump it out. You want more from that character, pump out another short story featuring that character. And if that happens enough times, as much as you're like actually feeling it and inspired to do it, it becomes like serialized. And you can just put all those in their own book separately, even if it's a series of anthologies with just one character that keeps popping up just because you love writing about them. You can collect all those and make its own thing from that character. That's the reason I'm going to go in that direction. I got my orc story, I got my reptilian story, and I got my human story, and I got my novel. I'll probably use humans symbolically just to dive into the most human elements of certain things. So that's why the protagonist of my full length is pregnant. It's a very human thing. A lot of emotions tied to that. This is how I'm going to be using these types of characters. I don't know if I ever will have like a deep one protagonist. In my mind, even the most intelligent creatures right now in the ocean, we can't even like really fathom the language that they're speaking to us, but we know that they have different dialects. We know they're smart enough to feel empathy, and they mourn their children and like make love for pleasure and stuff like that. It's still completely alien. Like their language is just like clicks. Creatures of the sea like that, like a deep one, is very alien. I try to make everything crazy in its own way. RK is ancient, as old as I need it to be. You'll see stories from every technology, traditional fantasy races, because fantasy races kind of fill the void in sci-fi for aliens that we all love. Lots of family stuff at the core, lots of symbolism, and I'll be trying to be as like biblical and poetic with the language as possible, with intent, as long as I get ideas, and I have a very, very full story seed folder. I hope you thought that was as interesting as I did. Thanks for listening, everybody. Hope that was useful. Remember, if you're forming patterns in your story, you can really use that to devastating effect using symbolism. I encourage people to just like think of how you can tie things in, even in the very descriptions of characters themselves. Everybody have a good new year. I feel like it's going to be a good one. Cheers.
Based.